I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Luke Pring. Luke is a senior health and safety manager who operates across Europe within the corporate sector. Good afternoon, Luke.
Thanks for having me, Peter. That's a hell of a long title you gave me there, but I appreciate it.
Hopefully I got it right.
You got it right.
Great. A lot of these interviews we've done so far, along with the theme revitalisation of the workplace, have been with what I would call operational FMs. And it's quite interesting to talk to you, Luke, because obviously you're coming at it from a slightly different health and safety perspective.
Sure.
So I'm not going to ask you a long first question. I'm just going to say a couple of words, if that's all right. So COVID-19.
The first mechanism we went to was the tried and tested mechanism of risk assessment. So we had to risk assess all of our sites across Europe, and we had to come up with site-specific risk assessments with various factors of how to get back to the office, because each and every country had a slight variation on how we had to do that. So it was a huge challenge, and I had to work really closely with FM and my colleagues in FM to get that to happen. So we would have been dealing with slightly different laws in Malta, different rules in Romania, and the same in Dublin and Ireland and around the rest of Europe. So it was a really interesting challenge, but it was really interesting to see that the tried and tested mechanisms were still useful. People understood red, yellow, green. And I think we had to accept that there was no way of eliminating this hazard, which is what we always try to do with any hazard, eliminate it. We could only reduce the risk to an acceptable level. And that's what we had to try and get across to our staff, that we're keeping you safe, but we're reducing the risk to the acceptable level. We can't eliminate this risk until a vaccine arrives. So it really did, take us all by surprise, and it really was a huge hit, but we had to show resilience, and a lot of businesses showed resilience and got back on their feet. So for me, something that really interesting that came out of this is that we really had to tackle safety and working from home. A lot of the time, a lot of companies had these agile working systems, and we hadn't really considered the working from home safety implications. It's very hard to control a lot of the hazards that you have in the home without having someone constantly there to monitor this. So it was really a big challenge for us to do that. And it's made businesses take that very seriously. And I do think I've seen a shift in mentality from, it's no longer work from home, it's become work from anywhere. And I think not only does safety have to adapt to that, but FM has to adapt to that as well. And I really do see that FM moving forward, it really is a case of adaptation. Facilities management is always going to be there, and I think that it's always going to be an extremely important aspect of the business, but it's going to change. I think that's important moving forward.
So I was talking to someone recently actually about that very point, and they made reference to FM being about people rather than about buildings.
Exactly. And I'll touch on it a little bit later, but I mean, I've been looking at I have virtual reality here, and they're looking at the virtual office now, and you can think that FM one day may morph into managing your offices within your virtual reality. So, who knows, the adaptations can move on and on. So for us, it was really about working very closely with FM to make sure that we had all the legal checks in place and all the return to work protocols, and that FM really implemented them on the ground. So that's how I tend to interact with my safety reports, or my FM reports, is to lay out what needs to happen, get their input, we collaborate, and then we come up with the control measures for the site. So a really collaborative process. Had to really work very closely with FM on it. And the other thing that also I was keen to not let happen was let the other risks in our offices or our retail get ignored. Simple things like first aid had fallen to the side, fire marshals, fire evacuation, things like that. So I think it's very important that while COVID controls are paramount to get into place, that we don't forget that there are another set of associated risks with doing business that we must control. In
your sort of experience, how does FM and health and safety interlink? What sort of model do you feel sort of works best, Luke?
For me, safety always works best when it's independent and it's not controlled by any of the institutions that it's looking at. So for me, I like to see safety sat outside of FM, but very much working collaboratively with FM. I work to the big one of the large tech companies in the past, and I sat outside of FM, but worked with FM every single day. So I think that is the optimal setup, because you have to hold these people to account. Saying that, I've sat within FM as well. It can be harder to hold your colleagues to account when you're sat inside, especially people who may be senior to you. It's hard to hold those people to account, but it does garner a better collaborative relationship. So there are benefits to being sat inside, but personally, I like to see the safety sat outside, because while FM is a very important function of the business, safety really does sit across that whole strata. From, you know, the classic case for me, a good example of this is you have FM and then you have IT. Safety, if it sits within FM, usually has a very good grasp of what's going on within FM, but won't really know what's going on with IT. And IT are usually doing whatever they want to do. They're bringing contractors onto site. They're not really playing by the rules. So for me, it does help when safety sits independent, is linked very, very high up in the organization, as high as possible, and can hold all aspects of the business to account in an even manner. So saying that, you do end up working mostly with FM. So, you know, that's the way I look at it. But it's important to remember that safety has a remit across the whole business. My background was working with the inspector in Ireland here. I came from that background. I was used to working in many different industries, going in and, you know, having that kind of power to, you know, get what you want done. So when you're sat within FM, that can be a bit more difficult, and you need to work a bit more closer with your colleagues. But I think that on the back of that, I have discovered that you will get a lot more by being nice to people than by being nasty. So I always try and sell people the value of safety. I try and sell them that it's a collaborative process, and that I never try and catch anybody out. I always try and work with people to find a solution. So I think that kind of holistic approach to safety within a global corporation is very important. And, you know, I think that the example of FM and IT, you have safety for FM, but not for IT, is poor. And I think corporations need to look at their risk across the spectrum and make sure that safety is in every aspect and sits as high as possible.
What's the future looking like? How can businesses navigate, I suppose, the current situation and, you know, move forward in a positive way?
I mean, yeah, it's changed our lives. It's completely thrown what we know up in the air. But I do see hope for the future. I do see that FM must adapt to a new world. Safety must adapt to a new world. And I think that for safety, the very important aspect, which I worked in for a long time, is safety in design, is getting these new designs into new offices and looking at things like self-cleaning surfaces, UV phone sanitization, no-touch doors, and even materials like copper being used. You know, it all kills coronavirus, and can greatly help to get safety measures in place. So I think it's very important to look at technology, look at the way forward. Working from home is now, or working from anywhere, as I like to call it, we have to facilitate those people. So it's very important for safety and FM to work together to make that happen and make sure that compliance is still met at all stages. So I do look to the future through technology. I think that there's some excellent innovations out there. I was looking at an article yesterday on LinkedIn around virtual reality, and I mean, this is what I have in the palm of my hand, and I can enter a virtual world here. For me, it could be about safety made interesting on this. You know, we could do accident investigations, we could do fire evacuations. There's already games you can play on these systems where you walk through virtual accident investigations and then walk back through time to see what happened and piece the puzzle together. So why could we not do that in business? Why could we not do that in safety? I think it's very, very important. I don't like to say health and safety because I think it has a bit of a bad image. I like to call it safety practice or safety management because it can be a very interesting subject. For me, I came from an international law background. I didn't just jump into safety as my first job. I came from a different background, and I saw that the genesis of health and safety was human rights law, Geneva Convention. It came out of those needs to protect the workers and to protect people. So for me, I think it's about making safety more interesting in the future. And definitely you have to build that into your culture, and that has to come from senior leadership in the business. They have to give safety the right platform.